Thank you, Dr. Clark. Tatiana Cantlay. I'm a co-author, but Dombrowski, Michael Rekacheski. I've never said your last name, Michael. I'm apologizing right now. Kylie, John himself. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. The rest of the afternoon. No. Thank you all for coming. This is the first time I'm presenting this particular work, but again, I think it typifies what's been going on over the many years here. So it's contamination of private water supply after a well communication event. As I said, I've been doing this with Dan for many years now, and it usually starts with a phone call. I think something's happening. I don't know what to do. Would by someone that my parents do. Again, one of the things I have to say here, and it's actually gotten me in trouble with the courts, this is an IRB approved study, so it means that I had to present this to university committee not to divulge the names of the participants. But apparently the company involved, which I won't name, is rather upset with me because I won't tell them who they are. So anyway, this, and this is, you've already heard this once before. This one came out June 19th, started at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Anyone who won't be home, please contact to all residents who live on Main Street from Fire Hall West to Heritage Road. Informed that there was a now, EQT will be contacting you all to test your water to make sure it wasn't affected or contaminated. I do not know, in caps, when this will happen, but suspect it will be in the next few days. If you smell gas or have discolored water, quote, do not drink or use. Okay, so anyway, so that's what happened. And this is my picture on the right there of the actual, now, that's not an unconventional well. That's a conventional well. And the story was that they were in, and it was mentioned again earlier today, they're going out several miles now. And each of these horizontal wells are fracked in stages. And it's not a couple. They're out hundreds now. So this particular well was at 7,800 feet depth. And they were in the 100th stage, moving closer to the well pad. But they were over 6,000 feet from the well pad itself. And I'll tell you why that's important. And somehow it communicated with a conventional well that was over 3,000 feet away to the point where fluids were coming to the surface. So do some of the math and you realize how far this stuff had to flow. Now, because I wasn't there when it happened and I couldn't get a sample, I can't tell you if it was frac fluid, I can't tell you if it was brine, this, that, the other thing, because I never got a sample of that. And the other funny thing about it was the only reason why the company knew something was wrong was because one of their workers happened to be on the property. They live in the house. And he went home for lunch and discovered that he had a geyser. So he called his boss and said, I think we got a problem. So anyway, so a series of events, 529, we're working on a manuscript right now, 619, it says communication incident. PADEP person responded to the incident. Company continued its operations. Oh, they were allowed to continue. Anyway, long story short, we have now been down there multiple times over the last several years. What we do, our survey, we have a field kit that we go out. We have they call it a YSI, where we take on-site pH, temperature, conductivity, and dissolved oxygen. We take the samples, we bring them back to the lab where we immediately test in my lab for chloride, bromide, fluoride, nitrate, nitrite, phosphate, and sulfate, as well as the light hydrocarbons, methane, ethane, ethene, and propane. And why I like to crow about this is because we do it right when we get the samples. Okay, things are analyzed within 24 to 48 hours. Now, the cations, and I thank my colleague Dan, we have to bring over to his lab, but they're fixed, they're preserved on site, so they're stable for quite long. But the reality is that the EPA allows you to have a light hydrocarbon sample sit around for 14 days before they consider it past due. And we know for a fact that things kind of, so our data is always more than anybody else's. All right, so, and here's just some of the pictures of this is our ion. And the other thing about, to crow about my particular setup is because a colleague of mine years ago turned me onto this, that most anion conductivity devices use conductivity, but he coupled his with UV vis. Why that's important is because we have increased the sensitivity for detecting bromide by 10-fold. So again, we often find bromide in samples that other people don't. Why? Because we use a combination of both conductivity and UV vis to verify that it actually is a bromide bump. Okay, all right, so this kind of summarizes the whole thing. By the time they were doing the particular well in this one here, that's the lumber, it's the lumber pad, they were simultaneously fracking several wells at the same time. Again, you have to give the industry credit because number one, they're drilling more wells per pad. Number two, they're going out further. And they're able to save on things by fracking multiple wells at the same time. But that all came to a screeching halt. Now, the other important thing is that there are more than just one pad out there. So we've got the lumber, we've got the spleen splitter, and we've got the Stolz. And you'll notice that they're very closely associated because they're getting every little drop of gas. Okay? But this was the lumber. And then that little star there, or the yellow, is where the frac-out happened. So the other important thing is, and put in, we don't have the other pad, there's another pad over here. The combination of the 28 wells on those 4 pads, the total volume, according to Frac Focus, 790 million gallons of fluids. So this, and a comparable amount of propant or sand. So these are our different sites that we actually got. Each one, as I said, I can't tell you who they are, but we give them a Marcellus Shale MS number. But these are all the samples that we've taken, and as I said, we've taken them around this. The Franklin Denny pad, there's the Michael Nicholas pad, Stolz, spleen splitter, and lumber. Now this red area here is the area that they said was the zone of impact. And those were the lucky people who got their water tested by the company, or the company's company that they hired to do that. So again, one of the first things we do, and because we have this IRB, we have a survey, and we just ask them simple questions like, do you have well water? Do you know where your well is? Do you know how deep your well is? What's the construction of your well? Is it artesian? Is it cable tool? Or is it, rotary? Because these things can impact the integrity of the well. And then we ask, do quality issues? And quantity, has it diminished at all? Quality, does it smell funny? Does it taste funny? Does it look funny? So here we have taste, smell, color, and did you have your water tested prior to, and can we see those results? But you can see here that it's kind of split. So we had a total of 49 people do the surveys. We actually had a few more do that, but again, I like paper. When if you have a little tablet, yeah, that's great, but sometimes things don't go kind of well. But anyway, we lost some data, but this is the data that we have for the 49 respondents for our test. So obviously, almost half the folks said, well, I don't notice anything. All right, so now getting into the chemistry. So what do we do with all that data? Well, Dan and I, over the years, been working very hard on this, and we've come up with a variety of different parameters. And what we like to do, because we don't have the, I don't have the money to do the isotopic stuff, is there a simple way to do this? And so we look at what we call mass ratio analysis. So here we're comparing calcium to strontium to calcium to magnesium. And I think you'll notice something very interesting here. There seems to be a gap there, doesn't there? So this is one of the indications that we have. Now, what are these little circles here? And that says MD. Well, that's mine drainage. So a couple years back, we published a paper, 3 papers, in fact, where we went through thousands of data points. We went through multiple databases to see if we could actually say, okay, if we take this information from other people, what does it do? And so we came up with some of these plots. So that's conventional oil, this is conventional gas, this is unconventional gas. So that'll, I don't want to say it's an inexpensive way of doing it, but again, it's an indication, it's a clue. And then this one here, sometimes, and again, because bromide is, you've seen it multiple times today, yes, the one thing about shale gas is it's got a lot of bromide in the brine. But truth is that even conventional oil wells have bromide. Not as much, though. So the problem is, once it gets diluted, you oftentimes can't see it. The other thing is, if you've got high chloride or other analytes, as we call it, in the sample, those samples are often diluted. And oftentimes, bromine is one of the first things that kind of like disappears because it goes below the detection limits that you can see. So anyway, so again, we're starting to see some very interesting things. And in this particular case, we've got a number of candidates here. And in this particular case, we're also showing you these values here are the values for methane. So say this well had 14,750 micrograms, or basically 14.7 milligrams per liter of methane. The action level for doing something in conventional oil is 10. So we already know that there are already some indicators here that we have brine associated with a gas well. Okay, here's another one that's a little complicated. This one is sulfate to chloride to magnesium to sodium. Again, why did we go through all these things? Is because we want to see if we can assemble more than one set of parameters to tell us that we're going down the right path. And of course, the other thing is, you know, that certain times you're missing certain parameters, and so you can't plot it. Like, as I said, you saw the fewer number of points on the graph with the bromide. This is my favorite, but anyway, this is the magnesium to lithium to sulfate to chloride. We have been trying for years to put lithium on the map because if you look at water quality data, you rarely see lithium. And I've got another project, it's called 3RQ, or Three Rivers Quest, with the University of West Virginia. We gave up asking the company to test for lithium because they couldn't find it. We're actually, again, we're using a commercial lab in this particular case because of the number of samples that we've been collecting. We're monitoring the water quality in the Three Rivers, okay? And we go out every, either once or twice a month. So that's a lot of samples, and my lab just couldn't handle it. But to this day, this particular testing lab, which is very famous and popular, has a hard time finding lithium. So anyway, so we like lithium. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some other plots. So that's the other important thing. 5 minutes, perfect. What this one is for, this is for chloride, and the size of the circle is how much chloride. So you can see certain ones are got a lot of chloride in them. And you can see, like, there's this cluster here of all the ones with chloride are in the zone. But there's other ones here. Okay, if we look at bromide, again, we're seeing not only detection, but a nice cluster right there at the zone. But there's other areas as well. And now this is for methane, and that's where things kind of got out of hand. We started seeing, going back later and later and later in the study, people with methane well, there was at least 2 homes that had over 30 milligrams per liter, and we had to tell them, you know, you might want to open the windows. Okay, is it safe for me to bathe? No, okay? So again, we're seeing these indications. And the other important thing is when we look at just not methane, but the other lighter hydrocarbons, because biogenic methane is pure. You'll never find it, you know, you sniff behind a cow, it's methane. well, some other things. But with, with a thermogenic well, and as I said, we don't do the isotopes, but we also see a correlation. Now, we've taken all this information now, and we've created what we're calling a contamination index. So we have 6 different parameters, the different sets of ratios, plus the presence or absence of methane and bromide. And now we have a scale from 0 to 6. And so what you're going to see here is, if it gets a plus for any particular parameter, that's a 1. Okay, so we have 6 different parameters. So we got a bunch of samples that are 0. Okay, and that's good because there's hope. We can use those sources of water to bring clean water to the town of New Freeport. I didn't mention that before. That's where it is. It's, as you probably gathered, it's southwestern PA in Greene County. Okay? But again, it's not just limited at this point to the zone. But, well, first of all, most of the folks here, they're definitely impacted. But then you have all these other folks here that weren't part of the story. What's going on there? And are they getting water? And this has been the challenge right now because the company refuses to give people water. And we're in court right now, and all we wanted, and I like to say this, at Christmas, the stuff was, the papers were filed. Please give these people water. I stood here, maybe over there, we had a little different setup 12 years ago, and I was telling people about a community in Butler, the Woodlands. They still do not have a source of public water. If we're going to do all this extraction, if we're going to do all this hydrogen stuff, we need public water for these people. So again, chloride was detected in all samples ranging from 0.17 to over 1,000 milligrams per liter. 2 wells had chloride above that MCL, also had explosive levels of methane. Okay, light hydrocarbons of 75 samples, 53 or 71% had methane, 42 had ethane, 11 had propane. 14 samples had methane above 10 ppb, 2 samples above 28. Okay, we also had issues with iron, manganese, and aluminum. And then, by the way, is a rare event. Turns out in the period of time between January of 2016 and May of 2024, the DEP posted 54 well communication incidents in Pennsylvania. That's not Ohio, that's not West Virginia. So these things happen, and what used to get me upset early on, and it still does, what goes on at 5,000 feet below the surface doesn't reach the top. Well, they were down almost 8,000 feet, and it communicated with a well that was 3,000 feet and up to the surface. The other thing is the zone of presumption is 2,500 feet from the wellhead. So DEP says, you're out of luck, okay? And seriously. So anyway, thank you very much, and that's what I have to say. Do we have time for
presentation? I believe is on because we'd be through the question period if it were up to me.